Youth unemployment seems to be an issue that no one around the world seems to have a straightforward solution for these days. And that's what we are talking about. What Korea has faced and what Korea is working on and what we see ahead. All coming up in this program, Upfront.
The Sampo generation is a new nickname for young people in Korea. Romance, marriage, childbirth. The term refers to young people in Korea who have given up these three things. Employment is the major reason for them giving up such major life goals. As finding a job becomes ever more challenging, they have abandoned their future as they can't bear the economic burden. According to statistics, youth unemployment reached a record high of 11%, but has since dropped to 7%. However, this statistic does not include those preparing to get jobs, whose numbers have increased by more than 70,000 since last year. More and more youth are dropping out of the job market, even though they are able and willing to work. Why is this happening? Aside from the global economic recession, another reason for unemployment is that young job applicants only want to work for large companies. Moreover, not enough jobs are being created in emerging sectors, and the working environment for non-regular workers is deteriorating. It is now difficult for young people to even enter the labor market.
특히 청년 일자리 예산을 20% 이상 확대하였습니다. 기업의 우수한 훈련 시설과 프로그램들을 활용해서 청년 1만 명을 직접 교육하는 고용 디딤돌 프로그램을 새로 도입하고 국가 기관 전략 산업 분야의 훈련 규모를 3만 5천 명에서 7만 7천 명으로 2배 이상 확대하였습니다. 일자리 창출을 위해 기업과 국민 모두가 한마음으로 동참할 수 있는 청년 희망 펀드도 제안하였습니다.
The government has implemented a variety of measures to tackle youth unemployment, expanding the budget for youth employment by 20%, increasing jobs within public institutions, and actively supporting young people who want to start their own businesses. Will these efforts by the government give real help to youth trying to take their first step into the world? Upfront discusses ways to tackle the youth unemployment.
For the discussion of this very interesting program today, we have several guests present in the studio. First, starting with President Park Young-bum of the Human Resource Development Service of Korea. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much for joining us. And also Professor Jorg Michael Dostal, who's at the Seoul National University, Professor of Public Administration. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for the invitation.
And also Director Kyu-dong of Business Incubation Center at Sookmyung Women's University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And also Mr. Simon Chen, a founder of JobSeekr. This is a venture company helping recruitments and also bringing change to the job market in Korea. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We have so many questions to cover here because this is such an important issue, not just for Korea, but all around the world indeed. You know, so many people all around the world are very much concerned about this issue here. And in Korea, we have our own angle to this. First, starting with Professor Kim, I want to ask you just to share with our audience overseas who are watching this program, what have been some of the major challenges and difficulties that the Korean youth have faced so far in seeking jobs these days?
Okay. Well, first of all, there are not enough jobs, right, for youth.
That's clear.
In Korea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And even for those jobs available in large corporates or small and medium-sized companies, youth expectations toward job and the status of job or a job itself It's different. There's a big gap between the expectation and the reality.
Mismatch between reality and expectation.
Yeah, that's
right,
the problem.
right,
And
right.
another problem is, I'm at school, right? Students come to me and always complain me about they don't know what to do to land a job.
I see.
That's the
But
problem.
that's interesting because in Korea we seem to have all this readily available set and list of things that one has to do to get a job, right? Like build your resume, take certain courses, and then get
Right.
certain scores of the
Right.
exams and stuff. But they still tell you they don't know what
That's
to
right. The specs, that's what they call it,
do. Right,
right?
right, in Korean.
But these days, all those candidates who are looking for a job, they probably have similar specs because they all know what to do.
They're all
they
alike.
have, they have to get a score on language,
Right,
and they have to get internship experiences and things like that, right? But they do not get a opportunity to even have an interview.
Interesting.
So even though they have a capability and they studied a lot and accumulated a lot of internship experiences, they want to get a chance to have an interview to present themselves.
That's interesting because it could mean two different things. Number one, the absolute number of jobs would be so small they may
right.
not get such a chance, or the jobs that they want themselves is so small.
That's so small.
So that's some issue. That's one issue that we need to crack here, and perhaps it would be nice to switch to Mr. Chen here, who has had accumulated certain experience on your own in the job market, right? The things that you ran into, challenges. Let's relate some of your personal stories to this point that Professor Kim has mentioned.
That's correct. So just to give you an update about my personal story, I came in 2009 as a graduate student. After finishing my studies, of course, I was interested in sticking around. I looked into job seeking, into opportunities available for someone with my non-traditional background, being from London, being an international student in Korea.
Right.
So I looked around and I saw that, perhaps some of the companies would be interested in someone with my talent.
Sure, I would think that.
But there's no way for them to find me.
Okay.
And likewise, there's no way for someone like me to find the companies. So we're looking in the wrong place.
My next question, I suppose, goes to President Park Young-bum here, the President of Human Resources Development Service of Korea here. First of all, we have a lot of questions about the data that's available out there for us to look at. For example, past, I suppose, February was the worst time in terms of youth unemployment when we had about 11%. And I'm sure our audience overseas will say, well, 11% is not that bad as an unemployment, but that was the worst number we had. And then the latest one, September, is 7.9%, right? Interesting thing is, okay, those numbers are all fine with Koreans, but even though we are concerned and we are glad to see it going down. But a lot of young people say, actually, when they're asked, the unemployment ratio that we see when we look around us, it's like almost 1 out of 5, like 20%.
Sure.
So the gap between actual numbers, statistics of youth unemployment on one hand, and then how people feel, how do we explain the difference?
So first, February was 11%, then it went down 9%. September it went down about 8%,
Right.
because February is the time many young people come out from the university or school.
After the graduation.
So they look
Right.
for jobs, and so that's why we have very high unemployment rate. And after 6 months, many of them have jobs, so it dropped down. But the unemployment rate is defined as to be classified as unemployed person. You have to look for, you don't have jobs, okay? Then.
Right.
And also you have to look for jobs,
Okay.
and also you have the capacity to perform your job. So some people looking for a job many months, then they don't have job day one, then they just give up. Then they are not classified as one of the employed person. So that's why we have so huge gap between the official unemployment rate of youth and the felt unemployment rate of youth.
So
And
indeed, you're indicating that there are a lot of young people who may stay out of the actively
market,
job-seeking status.
yes, that's right. And like also you have a job, like you you prepare your career, maybe taking some more studies or go to other schools, then you have a job as a part-timer in some convenience stores.
I see.
Then that person is classified as employed person because in the definition of the employment, you perform your job at least 1 hour a week, something like that. So he or she has a job, but still he or she is looking for a job, actually preparing for a future job. So it's quite complicated. So it's
So the statistical standard through which we measure the unemployment itself here in Korea has a little bit of gap between how that's done and then how Korean people see themselves. Right?
But yeah, that's right. But our definition of unemployment is according to the international labor standard. So it's all global standard.
So when you have a son or a daughter who are staying at home without actively looking for a job, that child is not classified as an unemployed.
Or not employed, so they are out of the labor market.
I see. Then I have this question to all of you here. President Professor Park has mentioned that the unemployment ratio itself has gone down since the time right after the graduation to the normal time of the year. Is there a possibility that these students who graduated from the college just get any kind of jobs in order to just get employed? Because when we see the number here itself, right, a lot of people seem to have gotten their jobs. So what do we say about that?
Well, I think somehow they don't want because they have to support themselves. Maybe they have parents to support them. That's okay, but still. They want to make some income, that's why they go for some jobs which they don't want.
Professor Dostal, we have to ask you this question. I mean, as a father of several children, myself, and also someone who's teaching, educating college students in school, I get kind of so emotional when I hear all these numbers because these sound really, really challenging, to put it in a neutral way. How is the situation in Germany? Do you see that many of a similar number of young youth in Germany unsatisfied with their job hunting situation and also dissatisfied with the jobs that they hold? If not, what's the difference between Korea and Germany?
Yeah, it always depends on what you are measuring. If we look at youth unemployment on its own, then youth unemployment in Germany is much lower than in Korea, and Germany is doing well for, in particular, two reasons. The first one is strong labor market institutions, and the second one is the existence of many bridges between the education system and the employment system.
What do you mean by strong labor market institutions?
Strong labor market institutions means historically, in the German case and in the case of other European countries that are successful, that the trade unions and the employers are strongly involved in managing the labor market with support by the state. In particular, in the German context, there is a vocational training system, and this vocational training system is jointly managed by the trade unions, the employers, and the state bureaucracy. As a result, Germany has a vocational training system with many classified different jobs. People train for them for 1 or 2 or 3 years. And afterwards, the transition towards the labor market is easier because people are qualified, and the qualification is accepted in the labor market by employers.
Well, it looks like this is what they say corporatism in political economy. The government and the labor union and the employers working together for a common cause here. What's interesting is in Korea, there is sense that labor unions in general are not as much interested in helping youth employment in comparison with other countries. How did your tradition, German tradition, come about? Why is it that German trade unions are interested in actually helping youth?
Yeah, it is true that labor market institutions do not come about overnight. In many cases, the institutions are very old.
Since 70s, 60s?
They sometimes are older, 100 years old or even older.
Even before the pre-war era.
If you look at the successful countries, that means Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Netherlands, Norway, and to some extent Denmark, they all have the strong labor market institutions that I have mentioned a moment ago. On the other hand, clearly Korea cannot wait for these strong labor market institutions to fall out of the sky.
Before we go on, however, let's take a look at this video that we got. This is an interview with young people in Korea telling us more about the challenges and problems that they face these days in trying to get their jobs. So let's take a look at this and then we'll come back.
Recruiting season in Korea is drawing to a close. What are the major concerns of young job seekers these days?
I think it's important to build up language skills by studying abroad.
I think companies want to see a variety of non-curricular activities as well as English scores.
According to a study by Statistics Korea, it takes about 12 months on average for young people to get their first job after graduation. They usually invest almost a year to improve their qualifications by raising their English test scores or getting an internship. However, young job seekers still face a difficult job market. This is especially true for highly educated youth. What is the reason?
It is difficult to find jobs even with college degrees. So many young people tend to postpone their graduation. That's because companies don't hire college graduates without any specialized skills.
The proportion of part-time employment among youth was 7.6% in 2007, but has almost doubled to 15.1% in 2015. Even among the 200,000 new jobs created by the government for youth, over half were part-time jobs like internships. Young people have been thrown into worsening working conditions as the number of job seekers are rising, but job creation has stagnated.
The government has proposed a lot of different measures so far, but they haven't really changed the actual conditions, so I haven't felt the difference yet.
College students have high expectations for their future career, and they think small companies do not offer the necessary benefits and salary level. That's why young people want to work for major companies.
Young people want to work for major companies as they offer more benefits. However, it's difficult because the efforts they put in to enter major companies or pass public service exams are not often rewarded with results.
Young job seekers have given up happiness in the present for their future dreams. Now is time for the society to offer proper solutions that can give hope to this generation.
Okay, we were talking about the expectation gap. The expectation on the side of job seekers, young people here in Korea, and then what's available in reality. And in Korea, especially older people, they're saying, well, if these young people are really interested in getting jobs, there are plenty of jobs available at SMEs and the smaller size of companies and so on. And this is usually those people who do not have children. Those children, those parents with children, they'll say they want their children to have jobs in big companies, big name companies. So how do we explain this? Why is this so-called what do you call it, distorted labor market or imbalanced, or like too much of focus onto these big companies? Mr. Chan, in your take, as someone who's coming from outside, what do you see? How do you explain this to other audience who are watching this program? What is happening?
Sure, so it's very interesting for me. I grew up in London. I went to university in London, and during that time, I was very much the same. I looked at the big companies, and I looked at stable jobs.
But that's because of your information, right? Because the names that you were, if you're talking about Korean companies, the names that you know are big ones. But are you talking about other companies in England as well?
So when I was in England and I was looking to graduate, I was thinking of going into a big company in the UK.
Okay.
But you know, it's because they have the biggest marketing spend, they have the biggest name value. It's immediately what comes to mind when you're about to graduate.
So this is global phenomena, you were saying. It's not really Korean thing.
To a certain degree.
I see.
But what was interesting after coming to Korea is seeing to what degree young students looking for a job in the workplace are drawn towards big companies and seem to overlook some of the more accessible options in the marketplace.
What about in Germany? Do you see similar phenomena that Mr. Chan was just describing? Young people, first of all, at the start of their job search, going for big names first?
Not necessarily. The problem of the Korean political economy is just there is this focus on the chaebols. And people who don't work for the chaebols are considered to have poor jobs, poor job quality, poor wages, and poor job prospects. However, you can to some extent try to integrate the economy more by making small and medium enterprise employment more attractive. And if you would have a more developed vocational training system, relatively speaking, the mobility for people to work for some time for a small enterprise, but possibly moving to a larger enterprise and the other way around would be much easier. So I think you need more bridges between the different labor markets that you have in Korea right now.
So what you're pointing out is the structural problem itself for the Korean economy in general, where the big name players are dominating the market and the smaller ones are more like on a weaker side, and we don't really have a small champions, what they call that. May have something to do with
so
that.
you said our labor market is distorted one, but I said our labor market is closed one because
Closed, okay.
When you graduate from university,
Yes.
then first of all you graduate university or not, that's important. Then which university?
That's one barrier, right?
Yeah, that's which university you graduate is important. Okay. Then with good university degree, then you go to the big companies. Then if you go to big companies, then you stay there forever until you pick out.
Right.
Then but if you go for small companies,
Yes.
then you have to stick there. So there is no movement.
Lack of mobility.
Yeah. So that's why we call that closed market. So in Korea, it's very important where you start. Where you start from public sector or bank or big companies, then you are in good position.
And also, job mobility, someone here mentioned these days, they're not hiring new hires as many of them anymore because they want more experienced professionals from outside. So that tells us the job mobility itself on the upside, it's rising. So we will have to take a look at the longer term trend that's happening in Korea. But on the side of employer, Professor Kim, there is a deep concern in Korea these days, the concern that Americans seem to have had during the 80s and early 90s, offshoring. Companies exporting jobs, setting up their factories and production facilities overseas. Some people say, I guess number can be disputed, but some people say Samsung and Hyundai actually have more employees overseas than in Korea. How do we deal with this question on a macro scale, you professor, and looking at the overall picture, how do we have to deal with this?
Well,
is it serious? Do we already feel the impact?
Well, in the case of my school, students that I see, they are already open to those opportunities offshore.
Getting jobs overseas, like Samsung jobs
yes.
overseas?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And big companies like Samsung and Hyundai also are welcoming students in Korea to come with us, to say Philippines and Indonesia or whatever. So and students alike are open for that. I think more students has to be like that.
Right.
And I have an example. One of my students went to Israel just to have an experience, just to explore, and she got a job in Israel.
Okay.
So there's a possibility if you take risk and challenge. So I think it's up to those individual young students and youth to look for jobs, not limit themselves within the country, but outside as well. And they could find a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities in Korea as well.
Right, right.
I have one example among my students who got an offer from big name company, like Chaebol.
Here in Korea.
Yeah, that's right. And at the same time, she got an offer from small venture company. She got two offers.
Right.
She decided to go to venture companies.
I'm sure parents oppose the idea.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe so, but what she saw there was the vision. So I think small, medium companies in Korea has to be able to provide visions, future visions to students and youth. So they could give up for big name companies and give up short-term, high pay, high name, but go for vision.
I love that idea. So you're saying the both sides, supply and demand, right? Job seekers, they need to open up their eyes, and then supplier of the jobs, the employers need to look for these kind of potentials and so on. I think that's one way of dealing with the situation. However, though, some of the issues that still stands in our way, the mismatch in education, for instance, right? A lot of people are concerned because almost all of Korean job seekers in the youth job market are college graduates, but not all the jobs are for college graduates. So what needs to be done here? Is there some way out of this mismatch in education? A lot of people seem to see it as a waste of resource and efforts and all that. Anyone?
Well, it might go back towards what I said earlier about the bridges between education and employment. I do think that one should consider first to accept the attitude in the Korean public that university is best. Yeah, it's difficult to change that because it's a very established attitude. But perhaps one can make at least some parts of the universities more like applied universities.
I see.
Universities,
more practical education?
Universities that have a stronger link towards technology or towards the workplace. That is what in the German context is called die Fachhochschule, the Applied University of Applied Sciences. On the other hand, I would like to say that this is not the only solution. We should also keep the universities strongly academic because the academic skills are also something that the employers are looking for.
Right.
And currently in Korea, because of the absence of something like a two-tiered system between strongly academic universities and strongly applied universities, we have students who are just preparing for some competitive exam rather than actually to work on their academic skills or their professional skills.
Exam scores.
Yeah.
Wrong focus.
I think if you work on your specs, in many respects you are wasting your time because the spec is only relevant for a particular exam or for a particular cut in a competitive evaluation of job seekers. But it is not actually preparing your skills that you would need on the job, and of course it's also wasting your time in academia to some extent.
Exactly.
Is the difference between Korea and other countries, including Germany, is one of the differences. We too many high school graduates go to university. Like in now it was a couple of years ago it was went up 80%.
80%. Here in Korea, we feel it's like almost over 90, way over 90%.
It went down now about 70%.
Is that right?
In German case, it's only 40%.
40%.
So
huge gap. Difference.
So now government and previous government, current government is doing is to encourage high school graduate don't go to university or study directly. Instead, they have a job and maybe work for a couple of years.
That's what previous government emphasized a lot, right?
And this government,
this government too. Okay.
is coming. Is the result is coming on? Then this government even more strongly encourages that policy. They say work and study your system, and also. Even now, this government is encouraging even for university take more actions on practical training, like the Sookmyung University. This year, the HRD Korea service selected 14 universities in Korea to support them to give more practical training for their students. And
so you're saying to see the results of all these efforts, we'll have to wait a little bit more?
Yes, but on the field, at the employers and workers participating in this program are very much satisfied. But we have to expand more to other university or companies.
So now our viewers know all these challenges and trends and efforts that are being made in Korea these days. So right at this moment, let's take a look at this interview with an expert on overall job market and the job, the employment as it relates to the economic questions, looking at the big macro picture. We'll take a look at this interview and we'll come back to continue our discussion.
지금 우리나라 노동 시장은
Korea's labor market has poor circulation because of the lack of flexibility. Especially in case of major companies, new regular workers are not being hired as the labor market is too rigid. The structure of the labor market is difficult for the entry of the new workers. Labor reform to enhance flexibility within the market will help the youth unemployment situation as well. The gap between major and small businesses has been widened in the past several decades. That's because of increased polarization, which has been the main cause of the gap in wage and working conditions. Simply suggesting that youth work for small companies is not the solution in this situation, because in their perspective, the working environment is inadequate. So improving the working environment and reducing the gap between the major and small businesses is the priority. The gap between the major companies and small companies is much wider in Korea compared to other countries. So the government and the labor unions should focus on raising wages and improving working conditions in small businesses, which will be the starting point for tackling youth unemployment.
That was an interesting interview here, and relating back to the points that were mentioned in the interview, as well as the point that Professor Park has mentioned before the interview, the efforts that are being made on a government level. The labor ministry has introduced this system. The name changes all the time, but I understand the Korean apprentice system.
Okay, so we call that work study.
Work study. Okay, I like it better.
Dual system.
Oh, dual system. How is it going? What's the idea of the program, and how is it going?
It's like, as I said, many young people go to university. So what government doing is encourage them to go to jobs, then have training there.
While they're in school?
No, in company.
Okay.
So it's like
before their graduation?
No, after their graduation.
Oh, okay.
And so like a German case, in high school, first they have a job, then they have the actual training in the company, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, then 1 or 2 days in a school. Here is you first have a job, then you go through sort of the formal training. Not it's like when you have a job first time, then you have your seniors teach how to do work,
right?
And in sort of informal way,
right?
But here in work study your system, you have a job, then your senior teach you, but in a very formal way. Like the government support the company to have their own program with some expert help.
Right.
And if they go through this training program while they work, they have some qualification certificate, which is considered equivalent to the academic diploma.
Interesting. Another one that we have to wait the result for. Relating to that, I want to ask Professor Dostal a lot of questions about what's happening in Germany, including the Hartz reform, but not now, because let's talk about the job creation and the entrepreneurship here first, and then we'll ask him the question about Hartz reform relating to the other issues of our market. I want to switch our focus to the entrepreneurship and young people here.
Sure.
The government, one of the key points of the current government policy for youth unemployment is encouraging youth to create their own business and get their job, create jobs on their own, basically. What is your evaluation from your perspective? The idea itself, and then results that it may not be created.
Absolutely. So my company is actually a beneficiary of some of the government policies.
Oh, okay.
We received government funding to help us get started and bootstrap the company. And it's something that I'd never heard of outside of Korea. The government funding foreign teams. Young Korean individuals thinking about entrepreneurship, there are many programs and support available for them at the moment. And I think it's a really good time for people interested in doing something different, perhaps taking the emphasis off the big companies and looking at creating companies that in the end go on to create jobs.
So you're saying on the supply side there are plenty of support that's available from the government, and then you're saying it's kind of unusual thing elsewhere, and we have plenty of public support available for young potential entrepreneurs, right?
The public support is readily available and the demand is increasing as well. You can feel it if you go out into the field. There are many young people seriously considering entrepreneurship these days.
Professor Kim, I have a serious question about that, because there are some skeptics out there who are saying maybe because of the plenty of supplies that are available, government support, maybe money is being wasted, whether this money is being spent meaningfully, whether young people are really creating a real kind of entrepreneurship. What is your observation on the front lines? You're seeing these, right?
Right. Well, that is a big concern. People say that if you push young youth to just go ahead and start up their companies, and there's a high chance of failing, then what? That's the question, right?
And there will be also moral hazard question, right? Here is government money, do something, and then they'll do something without really full commitment.
Right, that's right. But, well, if we do not start something like that because of those concerns, when are we going to start? I mean, that's important stuff. I mean, producing more young people to start their own businesses with their fresh ideas and innovative ideas that will lead to creating jobs for other youth, right?
That's true.
So even though there are some problems, we should go ahead with it.
I see.
But the thing is, there's a different two types of entrepreneurs who are pushed because there's no option other than starting their own businesses. It could be a problem. We have to lead them, pull them to see the opportunities with ideas and create opportunity-driven entrepreneurs. We have to train them. You know, the things that you see is that those people who just open up their businesses just because there are support from government, or
that's moral hazard,
or because I am pushed because I don't have any other options. That is a problem.
Another problem.
So in training institutions and training communities, we should have trainers, educators, should be able to train those youngsters to have an eyes to see the opportunities and start their businesses based on those opportunities.
That's a big challenge. You wanted to add something.
The point I wanted to make is, as Dr. Kim said, there's a serious chance of failure. In startups, 9 out of every 10 startups will fail. But failure is not such a bad thing. We can learn from failure, we can move on, we can learn very valuable lessons from our mistakes. And we think about entrepreneurship as creating new companies, solving needs that exist outside of companies, but entrepreneurship can be applied to companies that already exist. You can be an entrepreneur within a company, and entrepreneurship equals innovation. And if you bring that innovation into a big company, that can bring around enormous change that could go on to create more business.
I see some big corporations nowadays starting to value those entrepreneurship to come in as their employees. So
young people creating their jobs and entrepreneurship business, and then the big companies would like to welcome them in.
They starting to value those experiences that those young college students or youth had in starting up their businesses. If they fail, they could still have a chance to come back to big corporates. They're starting, but I want that to increase. So big companies has to start seeing those entrepreneurial experiences, entrepreneurial trials as a big plus.
I've noticed this as well.
Okay, we have hot discussion here. Okay, please.
If you have a look at some of the bigger internet companies or platforms, and you look at the job posts for new employees, a lot of the the preferred requirements do actually mention people who have tried businesses before, who have entrepreneurial experience. It's there as a preferred requirement.
You know, as we have just shared the idea here, the Korean government itself is doing a lot of different things to encourage young people to open up their own businesses and entrepreneurship. And we have this expert interview here that we should share with you, actually emphasizing those points. So let's take a look at it and we'll come back to our discussion.
Efforts by the Presidential Committee on Young Generation have focused on promoting fair youth recruitment that looks beyond paper qualifications. We have promoted a variety of campaigns and programs to give more opportunities for youth to find positions that match their capabilities rather than paper qualifications. Also, we have recognized various systems to offer a better environment for the young people who want to start their own businesses. For example, some measures have been taken for the adoption of related laws like the Crowdfunding Act. And we have promoted training programs to help youth find their aptitude and plan for their future career. Major companies should strengthen the support for venture businesses by investing, transferring patent R&D technologies, and promoting business incubation. When venture companies achieve a certain level of growth, an ecosystem should be created to support their global expansion through M&As. Comprehensive efforts from the public and private sectors, the government, and major companies are key to creating such an environment.
Okay, we have to manage time here, but we have so many different issues. So we still have, that means we still have really big issues that we need to deal with. Professor Park, when we talk about these job issues here, especially youth unemployment, we have huge political issues out there. For instance, getting concession from the older workers so that there will be more jobs available for young people. What we are talking about is the peak wage system, and then the follow-up measures to deal with extended retirement age and so on. What are the current progress on these issues, and are they being made? Are we finding solutions to this? Because people believe for young people to get their jobs, we need to work on these issues. So what's the current progress and your observation?
2 years ago, the National Assembly passed a law which required companies to extend the retirement age, set mandatory retirement age at the age of 60.
Right.
But there is no requirement. So it used to be like, except public sector, maybe 55 is the retirement age for most companies. So like 5 more years of extension. Then problem is Korean wage system is when you get old, then you get paid more. Without respect of your productivity or skill level. So what government is encouraging the private companies, and maybe you should, because the law requires that you have the company extend the retirement age at 60. Then you have to broad. If you reform your wage system, that's fine, but it's very hard. So on sort of the second option is to bring this so-called wage peak system. Maybe if you reach age of 57, then you have maybe 90% of your wage.
And then it continues to go down until your exit.
And now, including Asia, Korea, the all public institutions actually require to bring this wage peak system. And
so it has been accepted in public institutions?
About 90% of them.
90%, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
What about the private sector? Do we see some progress in terms of accepting the wage peak?
Some big companies brought this system, but some companies with strong unions still resisting to have this system. I think, but the concern about youth jobs is not just entire Korean society question. So I think eventually big companies, all big private companies will bring this system.
That is certainly the hope.
Yes.
But Professor Dostal, as you watched, from a little bit of an outsider perspective here, keeping in mind the German experience, right? Koreans have had certain difficulties in getting deals agreed and getting ahead with their agreements. And while we are working on it, we've been continuously talking about this German experience of Hartz reform. What is the main idea of Hartz reform? How did it work out in Germany, and how can it be applied to the Korean case?
Okay, but let me briefly go back to the earlier point of the wage peak system. I think this is just doctoring with the symptoms. The basic problem in the Korean case is that people are in the office for too long. There is a very poor distribution of work between younger and older people, which older people doing most of the work, younger people
most
being...
of the work?
Yeah,
I disagree.
The share of time in the office at least and of employment is strongly biased towards people over 40, while young people are kept artificially out of the office. What really should be done is to have a more sustainable way of using people's ability to work. That means shorter time in the office every day, and in exchange longer years in employment rather than early retirement.
Okay, so
that's
without changing the
point.
wage, just change the time. That's your suggestion.
That's one
Makes
point.
Sense. Right.
And regarding the Hartz reform debate in Korea, that is for me a little bit of a ghost debate. The Hartz,
Tell us.
It is not applicable to Korea.
Why not?
Because
what is it, by the way, for our audience?
The Hartz reform was an effort to deregulate a highly regulated labor market.
Okay.
But a Korean labor market is already highly deregulated. There is nothing that you can possibly further deregulate.
What about those people?
I disagree with you.
Right. What about those people who argue that Korean market is highly regulated for the interest of labor?
It is true that there is a small minority of people in the workplace in Korea, between 10 and 20% of people who have relatively highly regulated labor conditions. However, the solution to that is not to deregulate the little sector that is regulated, but rather to improve the conditions for the majority of people who live in, who work in a deregulated environment. And that also points back to the discussion you had a couple of years ago, and that I think you need to dust off and bring back, which is universal welfare, expansion of the welfare state in order to make the conditions in work more fair in all sectors of employment.
So universal welfare is something that's important because that way we will feel less insecure about losing our jobs, and it can create more job mobility and so on. But in Korea, this is a very homogeneous society up until now. And when these highly protected labor, you said highly regulated, but highly paid, highly protected labor, as long as they're there enjoying their benefits, other Koreans feel really bad about bringing change and then having to change and all that. So I think there is a political consideration for that as well.
Also, the highly protected labor market, the workers mostly belong to the big companies and public sector. So it's like for the big companies, they are sort of they have huge surplus because of the dominance of their dominance of the market. So like company and stockholders, workers actually take some sort of highly excessive surplus together.
And as long as that's in place, young people will continue to want to get their jobs there rather than here. So there is that serious imbalance question here. I think it's time for us to wrap up this discussion that looks like needs to go on for several hours here. Overall, what are the overall focus of the policy should be down the road? Starting with Professor Park, very brief on it as a wrap up.
Well, now today we focus on maybe short-term policy options, but I think first we need to provide some environment for good business. Because in many cases, many Korean companies complain we don't have a good business environment. So we should provide more business-friendly environment to a company. Then they can open up more business. Then they can create more jobs. And also we have to reform our labor market. As
Professor Dostal
said, we have very protected labor market. We have very fragile labor market. We have to provide more support for workers in fragile labor market, but also we have to bring some sort of reform like Hartz reform in a very highly productive labor market.
I see. So a lot of things to do ahead, and especially when we talk about the making better business environment, some people just show a knee-jerk reaction saying deregulation, but I don't think that's really like one way to go. There's so many different things we should do. Professor Kim, as very brief final words, as someone who has been watching all these efforts being made on the front lines.
Well, I think reforming the efforts has to be made to reform the labor market and SME business environment and education as well.
I see. Right.
So we have to find the ways to close the gap between world of works and world of training and education. So I see some efforts are being made, like IPP program, which is Industry Professional Practice Program by government. Nowadays, students are having a chance to go work for companies and have an experience and come back to school and knowing what to study now to get a job better. You know, that's good program beginning.
That's good. Yeah.
I see a hope there. And another thing is that I see these high school students got a job already and came back to universities.
Right.
So that's another way to create more youth to get a job first, secured, and then get an education. Now they will have better understanding of what kind of things they have to develop in themselves and get trained and contribute more to the economy, right? And entrepreneurship. We need to bring in entrepreneurship in society. And big companies has to have a mind to welcome those entrepreneurship. Sometimes when youth have entrepreneurship, they have to be able to exit.
Right.
Sometimes they have a fear when they start their startup companies.
Yeah.
My ideas would be stolen by big companies.
Right, right.
That has to go away.
Predatory practices and all that.
Big companies has to be flexible and paying those ideas, paying for those ideas, give them a vision for entrepreneurship for the youth.
Very good point. Professor Dostal, you called hearts reform, cost reform. So what are some of the, like one or two, very briefly, German experience that needs to be applied here?
Okay, I think first of all, fairness in the labor market is very important. That means improving the
fairness.
That means improving the career prospects of people with credentials other than academic ones.
Right.
Yeah. Once you do that, the chance is that the vocational training system would be more attractive to Koreans, would be more acceptable also for parents who often are important in if you like, telling their children or advising their children.
Right.
And I think that again points back to the fact you need a more inclusive labor market. Yeah, a labor market in which there is not all the reward going to a small minority, but rather there is a general welfare system. People can find ways back towards training if they are unemployed, and after training returning to the labor market with better prospects.
Great point right there. And Mr. Chan, you're the last speaker because you are the one who's really trying to bring in change to this labor market on your part of the world. What are your final words in terms of what you're seeing here in Korea and what you want to see down the road?
I think I would agree with Professor Dostal. Perhaps more diversity in the workplace and a more inclusive workforce where people with different backgrounds, with different experiences are valued just as much as those who are heading for the big famous companies. And that could be brought around with entrepreneurship or a boosted, improved sort of small, medium-sized business layer.
Great point once again. Too bad we have limited time because we have a great discussion here. I have certainly learned a lot from our speakers here, guests who have shared with us wonderful points. So thank you very much for your deep insights. Thanks.
Thank you.
And of course, we want to thank our viewers who have joined us from all around the world for this important discussion today. And certainly, of course, we want to see you again next time here in this program, Upfront. Until then, goodbye.